What is a miracle? Have you ever seen a miracle? Can you think of any miracles from the Bible? There's lots of them in there. How about the story of when there were 3 men and they were thrown into the fiery furnace? What happened to them? They didn't get burned up, okay? They came out safe, okay? God performed a miracle. Those men should have gotten burned up, but they didn't because God was in charge and God had a plan. There was also a story in the Bible of a very elderly couple. Okay? They were very, very old. And guess what? God performed a miracle. That couple, they had a baby. Okay? And they were very old. Okay? But God was in charge. God had a plan. And God performed a miracle. There was a man who was healed of leprosy. And you want to know how he got healed? He got healed by going into the river 7 times. Okay, now that just seems crazy, but that's a miracle. Okay, God was in charge, God had a plan, and God performed a miracle. Last week, okay, if you remember, how the Pharaoh of Egypt had finally decided to let the Israelites go. He had had enough. He was sad. He was upset. He was full of a mixture of emotions. Okay, however, it was only after God had sent those 10 plagues on Egypt, and in the end, Pharaoh's son was even killed. Okay, it had to go that far for Pharaoh to let the Israelites finally go. The Israelites obeyed God and they left right away. They followed the Lord's instructions and ate the Passover meal in haste. The bread they made, it did not contain yeast, and it's called unleavened bread. This type of bread is still used today by the Jewish people to celebrate God's protection from that 10th plague. Now, our story finds the Israelites once again in a predicament. Many people thought it was a trap, but we're going to read from our Bible to see what happened today. Exodus 14, verses 5 through 31. Exodus 14, 5 through 31. The king of Egypt was told that the people had escaped. The Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them. They said, "What have we done? We let the people of Israel go. We've lost our slaves and all the work they used to do for us." So he had his chariot made ready. He took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots in Egypt. He also took along all the other of them. The Lord made Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, stubborn. So he chased the Israelites as they were marching out boldly. The Egyptians went after the Israelites. All Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen and the troops, they chased the Israelites. They caught up with them. They caught up with the Israelites as they camped by the sea. The Israelites were near. They were near the sea, across from the Baal of Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked back. There were the Egyptians marching after them. The Israelites were terrified. They cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Why did you bring us to the desert to die? Weren't there any graves in Egypt? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? We told you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone. Let us serve the Egyptians.' It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die here in the desert." Okay, real quick, does it sound like they're trusting God? Does it sound like they're remembering that God is always in charge and God always has a plan? They aren't, not at all. Okay. Moses answered the people. He said, "Don't be afraid, stand firm. You will see how the Lord will save you today. Do you see those Egyptians? You will never see them again. The Lord will fight for you. Just be still." Then the Lord spoke to Moses. He said, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the people of Israel to move on. Hold out your walking stick. Reach out your hand over the Red Sea to divide the water. The people can go through the sea on dry ground. It will make the Egyptians stubborn. They will go in after the Israelites. I will gain glory for myself because of what will happen to Pharaoh, his army, chariots, and horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. I will gain glory because of what will happen to Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." The angel of God had been traveling in front of Israel's army. Now he moved back and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved away in front of them. Now it stood behind them. It came between the armies of Egypt. It came between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Although all through the night the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other. Neither army went near the other all night long. Then Moses reached out his hand over the Red Sea. All that night the Lord pushed the sea back with a strong east wind. He turned the sea into dry land. The waters were divided. The people of Israel went through the sea on dry ground. There was a wall of water on their right side and on their left. The Egyptians chased them. All Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. Near the end of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud. He saw the Egyptian army and threw it into a panic. He jammed the wheels of their chariots. That made the chariots hard to drive. The Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for Israel against Egypt." Then the Lord spoke to Moses. He said, "Reach out your hand over the sea. The waters will flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." So Moses reached out his hand over the sea. At sunrise, the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians tried to run away from the sea, but the Lord swept them into it. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen. It covered the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the people of Israel into the sea. Not one of the Egyptians was left. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground. There was a wall of water on their right side and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the power of Egypt. The Israelites saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. The Israelites saw the amazing power the Lord showed against the Egyptians. So the Israelites had great respect for the Lord and put their trust in him. They also put their trust in his servant Moses. All right, so just a few questions about this story. Who did Moses say would fight for the Israelites? Who fights for us? It's the same answer. God. And God was going to fight for the Israelites and for Moses, and God always fights for us. What would the Israelites need to do? Okay, what were the Israelites going to have to do in order for God to fight for them? What did God say? Nothing. Okay, he told them, just be still. How did God keep the Egyptians away from the Israelites before they crossed the Red Sea? Do you remember what happened? Okay. He placed a pillar of fire between the two of them. Okay, and what happened when Moses stretched out his hand over the sea the second time? Okay, the first time it parted, it split between so that the Israelites could walk through on dry ground. And then the Egyptians, they started chasing after them, and then God told them to stretch out his hand over the Red Sea, and all the waters came down. Okay, and it took out the Egyptian army. It took out Pharaoh and his army, and they all drowned. How in this story do we see God's protection? Okay, where was God protecting somebody? He was protecting the Israelites all along. He had a plan. God was in charge. And God performed a miracle. Okay, parting the Red Sea, that was a miracle. Okay, he performed the miracle to stop the Pharaoh's army from doing any harm to the Israelites. Okay, God was fighting for the Israelites. God's power is revealed in so many ways. No one but God could part the sea. God also does many powerful things for us every single day. He brings the sun up every morning. Okay, he showers the earth with rain, and he makes the trees grow. This weekend, I want to challenge you to do something. I want you to do something this week, and I want you to spend some time in prayer. And I want you guys to thank God for all of his mighty power. And during this week, think of things throughout the week that you can see how God is fighting for you, how God has a plan, and how God is in charge. Next week, we're going to do something a little bit more fun. We are going to read a story. We're going to take a little break from Moses, and we're going to read a story. If you guys came to Awana and you were in the Sparks, you'll kind of remember this story somewhat from Sparky. But we'll do a little fun story next week, so you'll have to come back.